The NHS in England is set to miss targets on recovering the cost of treating foreign visitors. The National Audit Office says it will lose out on millions of pounds a year by failing to identify foreign patients. Also this lunchtime, rebel groups in Syria launch a new offensive to try to break the siege of Aleppo by President Assad's forces. A landmark rulings as Uber drivers are set to learn if they're considered self-employed or employees of the minicab firm. It's the size of Germany, Italy and the UK combined. The world's largest protected marine reserve gets the go-ahead in Antarctica. And helping to save the elephant population of Malawi, Prince Harry works with wildlife conservationists to move hundreds of elephants to new homes.
Here in the south, the lethal diet pills being sold online. The mother of one man who died from taking them speaks about her heartache. And Graham Moody has dementia, but now there's a row about who should pay for his long-term care.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to BBC's News at 1. At a time when the NHS faces a hospital deficit of £2 billion, it's been charged with not doing enough to claim back money it owed for treating overseas patients. The National Audit Office says the NHS in England will lose out on almost £150 million a year by failing to identify European patients. The Department of Health says the amount recovered from foreign governments has more than trebled in 3 years. Our health correspondent Robert Piggott reports.
Hospitals need every penny they can get. The NHS in England ended last year with an unprecedented deficit of almost £2.5 billion. But its failure to charge overseas patients means it's hemorrhaging money and, says the National Audit Office, most of it should be quite easy to recover. The government aims to claw back £500 million a year from overseas patients by 2017 to 18, but it's forecast to fall £150 million short of its target. The main reason? A failure to collect £130 million from European governments for treating their citizens in English hospitals. But health trusts such as St George's in Tooting say they face another huge drain on their resources. Patients from outside Europe, many of whom travel to England to use hospitals, knowing they're not entitled to free healthcare. The government's introduced a surcharge for visitors who do apply for visas, £150 for overseas students and £200 for temporary immigrants.
We know that the average cost for treating an overseas visitor is overall about £736 over the very large number of overseas visitors coming to this country. I hold a letter from the Home Office which confirms that the number of health surcharge visas issued 2015-2016 is just under 450,000. That is a staggeringly large number.
Hospitals have a legal duty to recover the costs of treating overseas patients, but the National Audit Office says many frontline staff are simply unaware of the need to do so.
Only 58% of hospital doctors were aware that some patients were chargeable, and I think it was 45% of hospital nurses. So clearly there's some way to go before all staff are aware what the legal position is and take into account that some of the patients they're treating may, at the end of the day, have to pay for their charges.
The Doctors' Union, the BMA, says charging must not prevent patients getting the care they need. A doctor's duty is to treat the patient in front of them, not to act as a border guard, it says. Sick and vulnerable patients must not be deterred from seeking necessary treatment, otherwise there may be serious consequences for their health and that of the public in general. The government says it's tripled the amount of money it recovers from foreign patients and will take further steps to ensure that it meets its target. Robert Piggott, BBC News.
A group of Uber drivers who've been fighting for more rights will find out this afternoon whether their case has been successful. The drivers who are being helped by the GMB union say they should be classified as workers rather than self-employed and be given entitlements like minimum wage and paid holiday. If they're successful, it'll have implications for many more unemployed workers. Our business correspondent Simon Gompertz reports.
Uber drivers, they get their jobs via a smartphone app. They're pioneers of the digital age, but they don't have workplace safeguards like the minimum wage.
You know, my average net in July was $5.03 an hour, well below minimum wage. So if you want to cover your costs and keep the family afloat, you've got to work a lot of hours.
The argument is over whether Uber drivers are self-employed. Uber says they're their own boss, or whether, as the drivers bringing this case say, they should have basic working rights like holiday pay and the national minimum wage or living wage.
I just do my business as I want it, or when I go away.
Yet many Uber drivers do value the flexibility they have, being able to manage their own time.
I don't want to be owned by a company. I don't want to be ruled by a company. I want to do my projects. I want to, achieve my goals, build my own business, build my life and, run my life.
And Uber says they do make good money.
Looking at what drivers take home is something that we look at very, very carefully. What we find is that most of the drivers using the app actually take home around £15 or £16 an hour. Obviously, their costs vary hugely depending on whether they rent or own and a number of other factors. But the majority of them are actually making around £10 or £12 an hour, even after those costs.
Today's Employment Tribunal decision could have implications for other new businesses which use the latest technology to link up with the people who do the jobs. It's being called the gig economy.
They will need to look at the way they employ people. If they're calling them self-employed, is that right? Or do they need to actually look at their workers and say, we need to pay the minimum wage, we need to pay them for their holiday. These people are entitled to workers' rights like everybody else.
Whoever wins the Uber case, the debate over working rights will go on. The government's just commissioned a 6-month study to consider whether the law needs to be updated. Simon Gompertz, BBC News.
The United Nations says tens of thousands of people have been abducted by Islamic State militants around the Iraqi city of Mosul. It says they are being used as human shields as Iraqi-led forces try to recapture the city. A UN official said more than 200 civilians and captured Iraqi soldiers had been killed by so-called IS this week. Now, police in Calais believe there are still 107 children in the migrant camp known as the Jungle. They said all will be offered places in reception centres. The adults left will also be given a last chance to go. If they refuse, they could be arrested. Our correspondent Simon Jones is there for us. Simon.
Well, having threatened there will be no more registration for adults, the authorities here have had a change of heart. And we've just seen as well 2 coachloads of children loaded up to go to centres across France. The children over there. Over here we've got volunteers saying farewell to the final group of adults who are due to leave. But this is the final chance. The police are warning if the adults don't go, they will face arrest.
As the diggers roll in again, more of the jungle is going up in flames. It's hastening the destruction, but adding to fears for the safety of the people still there, particularly the children, more than 100 at the latest count.
I'm very, very worried because understandably they are getting increasingly distressed and scared and tired. The jungle was never a suitable place for kids, even before the demolition started.
Many adults and children bedded down here overnight at a makeshift school at the camp that has escaped demolition so far. But the authorities insist all those left must register. They say some of the children are refusing to, but some people describe it as a confusing and frightening situation.
How long have you been here in Calais?
Like 4 months.
4 months. What will you do now?
I don't know now. I'm going to outside. Bus is coming maybe.
You're still trying to get on a bus?
Yeah.
Yesterday, expected buses to take migrants to reception centres didn't appear.
Walking through the jungle today really is a strange experience. Just 5 days ago, this was home to thousands of people. Now you see more police officers than migrants. This place really is being shut down.
Having declared the operation complete 2 days ago, the authorities are now trying to work out what to do with the people who remain.
The people still here, particularly the children, what's going to happen to them?
I don't know. I'm just here to have the number, how many person is here, and after I will send the information. I have no answer for the moment. I have no official answer to know what we do with this person. For the moment, I don't know.
Why are there so many people still left?
I don't know, because all these persons are not from the camp. They come from other places.
Some of them are. Some of them are.
Who makes the decision?
More children are being taken to the UK today, away from the flames, but the concern for those who are left is increasing.
Well, I think there has been a bit of a difference of opinion between officials and the police. Officials declared on Wednesday the camp was empty. The police said on Thursday, no, it wasn't. Officials said there will be no more buses, but now the police have organised more buses, but this, the final chance, although we understand that not all the migrants are getting on board, so it may not be the end of this story.
OK, Simon, thank you. A chef accused of murdering 4 men says he last saw one of them at a sex and drugs party. Stephen Port from Barking denies murder and charges of drugging, rape and sexual assault relating to 8 other men. Our Home Affairs correspondent Daniel Sanford is at the Old Bailey. What's the court been hearing then, Daniel?
Well, Kate, after 3 weeks of prosecution evidence, this is now Stephen Port's opportunity to give his version of events to the jury. Yesterday he was asked about the death of Anthony Walgate, the first man to die. He admitted to the jury that he'd lied about the fact that Anthony Walgate had spent the night with him the night before and had said that he'd subsequently pleaded guilty to the police for lying about the death, but insisted that he wasn't responsible for the death. Today, he was talking about the deaths of Gabriel Kavari, a 22-year-old Slovakian, and Daniel Whitworth. He said that Gabriel Kavari had moved into his flat on the bank holiday weekend of August 2014. On the Tuesday, they'd gone to a gay sex and drugs party, that Gabriel had left with somebody called Dan, gone back to their flat, and that he had never seen him again, and that he later found out 2 weeks later that Gabriel Kavari had been found in a local church graveyard, propped up against a wall amongst the graves. He then said that he met Daniel Whitworth, who was the Dan that Gabriel Kavari had left the party with. That Daniel Whitworth had been very upset about Gabriel's death and had said to him that they'd gone to the churchyard together, taken drugs and had sex together, and that when Daniel had woken up, Gabriel had been dead. Stephen Port then told the jury that Daniel Whitworth had asked him to write a note to say how sorry he was for Gabriel's death, and that note was subsequently found in Daniel Whitworth's hand when Daniel Whitworth was also found dead in the same church graveyard. The case continues, and Stephen Port will continue to give evidence about the people who say that he raped them and about the 4th death. OK,
Daniel, thank you. From the Old Bailey, Daniel Sanford there. Police in Birmingham have launched an investigation into the deaths of 2 children after a fire at a house in the Hampstead area early this morning. The boy and girl were taken to hospital but could not be saved. A woman was also treated at the scene but did not suffer a serious injury. Royal Bank of Scotland has made a loss of nearly £500 million in the 3 months to September. The largely state-owned bank also confirmed it would miss a deadline for selling off its Williams and Glyn branch network. Fierce fighting has broken out in Syria, with opposition forces there saying they have launched a fresh attempt to break the government siege of Aleppo that's been in place now for more than a year. Our Middle East correspondent James Longman is in Beirut. Well, just tell us more then, James.
Well, this is the counter-attack that the rebels have long been promising would come in response to that siege of East Aleppo. They've seen international diplomats fail in their negotiations to try to end it, so they feel they need to take things into their own hands. The fighting started about 8 o'clock this morning local time. Huge explosions reported in the south of western part of Aleppo. There were also suicide truck attacks launched at army checkpoints in the west, and about over 150 rockets launched against an airfield to the west of Aleppo, in the further out in the Aleppo countryside. Now, this is a coalition of rebels doing this. They come from all over the region nearby Aleppo, towards Idlib and further north. This is a part of Syria which has been under rebel control for some years now, but it's unclear just how much they're going to have in the way of success of liberating East Aleppo as they see it, for 2 reasons. Mostly because one of the major groups that's spearheading this operation is an Al-Qaeda affiliate, so they're not going to get any help from the West if that's what they want. But most importantly, they're going to come up against severe opposition by not just the Syrian regime, but of course their Russian allies, the Iranian militias that fight there, the Lebanese, the Iraqis. This is not a fight which is going to be easily won.
OK, James, thank you. It's exactly now then 1:15, and our top story this lunchtime. The NHS in England is set to miss targets on recovering the cost of treating foreign visitors. Bangladesh collapse on the first day of the second test in Dhaka, losing their last 9 wickets for just 49 runs.
And coming up on South Today at 1:30, the lethal diet pills being sold online. The mother of one man who died from taking them speaks about her heartache. And the badge carved into the Wiltshire countryside officially unveiled in time for this year's Poppy Appeal.
Now, after years of talks, the Ross Sea in Antarctica will become the world's largest marine reserve. Delegates from 24 countries and the European Union have agreed to create an area of more than 500,000 square miles that will be protected from commercial fishing and mining. Matt McGrath reports.
In the freezing faraway waters on the edge of the world's coldest continent, life is abundant. The high seas surrounding Antarctica are home to millions of penguins, whales and seals, but as they belong to no one country, no one has been able to stop an influx of large fishing boats into the area, searching for valuable krill and toothfish. Scientists say that these incursions are threatening not just the mammals that live here, but also the fragile, unspoilt ecosystem that spreads nutrients from this deep, dark ocean to the rest of the world. Now, after years of fruitless talks, the nations that have a stake in Antarctica have finally agreed to limit fishing in a huge section of the Ross Sea. Key to the agreement was Russia. For 5 years they had blocked a deal. But while relations between the West and Moscow have cooled in most parts of the world, there's been an exceptional thaw when it came to protecting the seas around the South Pole.
There could not have been a worse time to be trying to do a deal, particularly with Russia. And in spite of all those differences, we've managed to see agreement reached here.
The new protected region covers an area bigger than the combined size of the UK, Germany, France and Italy. But as part of the compromise, fishing for research purposes will continue in some parts. And the agreement has a time limit of 35 years, a restriction that many conservationists were unhappy about.
We should have found a right, correct balance between the interests of environment protection and the interests of the fishing nations. And I hope we found a right balance in this regard.
Long-distance swimmer Lewis Pugh, who plunged into the icy Antarctic to draw attention to the issue, says that despite these limitations, the deal is a significant step forward.
Yes, it's about the environment, but most of all it's about justice. It's about ensuring that we look after our environment for our children and our grandchildren.
There are many outstanding questions about who will police such a massive area of international waters. However, most campaigners believe the new Antarctic protected zone sets a powerful precedent for safeguarding other parts of the high seas in the decades ahead. Matt McGrath, BBC News.
Every year, almost 750,000 women in England and Wales are victims of stalking. Many feel the law doesn't do enough to protect them with overly lenient jail sentences. Some MPs are trying to double the maximum sentence for anyone found guilty of stalking from 5 to 10 years. Well, their discussion was prompted by the case of Dr. Ellie Aston, a GP who was harassed by a former patient. She's spoken to Graham Satchell about her ordeal.
When he's not in prison, I'm a wreck. I hide behind sofas and I can't go out the house, and I live in a permanent state of anxiety. It's very, very worrying and anxiety inducing, and I don't like to think about it. I'm scared, very scared.
Ellie Aston is a GP. She's been stalked by one of her former patients for more than 7 years.
The general public tend to think that this is a celebrity-driven thing. I'm not famous in any way, and I never sought this, and I never did anything to cause it in any way, but it happened to me, and it can happen to anybody.
This is Ellie's stalker, Raymond Knight. It's never been clear why he started his campaign against Ellie, but for years he followed her, took photographs, sent threatening letters.
He'd follow me on visits, he'd follow me home. Over 100 incidences of him walking up and down past the surgery, round and round the surgery, parking outside the surgery, watching it for hours every day that I was there. You start to think the worst. Was he trying to get an idea of my timetable and to attack me somewhere, or what purpose did he have to it? And I think it's the not knowing what's going on in their minds that's the worst thing, because you start to imagine the worst.
In 2012, Ellie's house was badly damaged in a fire. There wasn't enough evidence to pin the blame on Knight, but police found images of the fire on his computer, along with photos he'd taken of Ellie. Figures from the Crime Survey of England and Wales show up to 700,000 women are stalked every year. According to the Met, 40% of domestic violence cases that end in murder are preceded by stalking. And the maximum sentence for stalking, 5 years. Ellie's stalker Raymond Knight has been jailed twice and is in prison now.
The actual amount of time these people serve is an average of 10 months, which is just ridiculous because, one, it doesn't give the victims a chance to recover or to feel safe for any prolonged period of time, and two, it doesn't give any option for rehabilitation of these offenders.
When Knight is released from prison next year, Ellie knows there's every likelihood he will resume his campaign against her.
I have to think that there is a possibility that his behaviour will escalate to more violent activity. I hope it won't. Of course I hope it won't. But the evidence suggests that it's quite likely to.
Graham Satchell, BBC News.
Prince Harry has spoken about his time working in the African bush, helping wildlife conservationists move hundreds of elephants huge distances to new homes. The Prince spent almost 3 weeks on an ambitious initiative in Malawi, which aims to move elephants from areas where their numbers are abundant to locations where poaching and habitat loss has resulted in a drop in population in some areas by almost a third. Andy Moore reports.
Africa, and especially its wildlife, are close to Prince Harry's heart. This was a previous visit to the Kruger National Park in South Africa, where he saw the carcass of a rhino and its calf killed by poachers. But this summer he spent 3 weeks in Malawi, helping to move 500 elephants from one wildlife reserve to another.
One of the fears, sort of overcrowding of elephants and wondering where are we going to put all these animals, you know. In some countries the numbers are, you know, dropping unbelievably quickly. In other countries you've got, you know, almost too many, so there's this weird imbalance.
Those in charge of the operation said Prince Harry had extensive field experience and a genuine commitment to the cause. For him, it was very much a hands-on experience. He was closely involved in guiding the giant animals after they had been anaesthetised.
It's amazing to see such unbelievable creatures being moved in a way that you could never even dream of. Everyone's part of this, whether it's moving a leg and putting the strap on, whether it's helping. Every single person feels part of this. In a weird way, they know we're here to help. Otherwise, you know, in the wake-up box would be a completely different story. And they're so calm, they're so relaxed, and they're going from one beautiful place to another beautiful place.
Prince Harry said he was convinced the animals were free from stress during their 200-mile transfer to their new home, where they will have room to thrive. And next time Prince Harry puts on a suit to join his brother and father in campaigning for wildlife, everyone will know that he has personal experience of what he's talking about. Andy Moore, BBC News.
Now, emojis are small pictures attached to text messages, as you'll probably know, in social media. They convey a mood or emotion. They've become pretty much part of our everyday communication now, most often, though, by the younger generation. That could be about to change, however, after a grandmother from Coventry designed a new set of emojis, which she believes are more appropriate for her generation. They include bingo, false teeth and looking disapprovingly over glasses. Phil Mackey reports.
There are thousands and thousands of different emojis for every possible mood. But once you reach a certain age, there are a whole set of new life experiences to share. An aching back, the nagging feeling you've forgotten something. And Diane Hill thought something needed to be done.
The reason why I want to keep up to date with social media, more and more communication is by that means, and as you get older, if you actually don't keep up, you're going to lose out, and it will cut down the ways that you can communicate with youngsters. And I think that if there were emojis that older people could use, they probably would use the social media that much more and keep in touch.
It's BBC, Coventry and Warwickshire.
A chance conversation with her BBC local radio station led to an introduction with an artist. In a small studio, the work began, and this is how the ideas took form.
You're going to bingo, you send the smiley icon with the bingo eyes, so they've got numbers in. And there was also another icon for grandparent duty. with all the kids around her and stuff. So no, it's good fun. It was really good fun, and she's a lovely person.
Sadly, you won't be able to use these emojis yet. There's an international organisation which approves designs. Hers will be submitted, and Diane hopes some of her best will make the cut.
A little emoji that just says, yeah, I'm going to spend it.
And wind them up at the same time.
Yeah, that's right. So when I go somewhere, I can just send them the little picture of me actually saying, or when I go shopping, spending your inheritance again.
Emojis are increasingly common. Obviously, there's the smiley face and the sad face. But there aren't emojis for every circumstance or every person, especially the older generation, which is why Diane has come up with such ideas as the memory pill or even the looking over your glasses and frowning. Phil Mackey, BBC News, Warwickshire.
OK, England's cricketers reached 50 for 3 at the end of the first day of the second test in Dhaka, having won the toss. Bangladesh had been 171 for 1 in their first innings before losing their last 9 wickets for just 49 runs. Our sports correspondent David Ornstein reports.
If England's cricketers are used to being rescued by the rain at home, now it's also saving them abroad. Having edged a thrilling first test, the tourists look determined to make the second more simple. But the early loss of Imrul Kayes only spurred Bangladesh into life. Tamim Iqbal was the architect, with Mominul Haq a more than able assistant. Make tigers angry and they tend to lash out. Tamim got to a century in textbook fashion, the 8th of his career, a knock of the highest quality. The same could not be said of his dismissal. The next to go was Mominul, and soon England were energised. Moeen Ali and Ben Stokes to the fore as 8 wickets tumbled for just 30 runs. From 171 for 1, Bangladesh were 220 all out, a collapse of extraordinary proportion. So England with the momentum and a chance to capitalise. This, after all, was said to be a good batting wicket. This, though, was not good batting from Ben Duckett. England can often rely on Alistair Cook to dig them out of a hole, but when the captain was trapped in front of his stumps, the computer said out. True to form, Gary Ballance fell cheaply too, leaving the task of lighting up England's innings tomorrow to Moeen and Joe Root. David Ornstein, BBC News.
The bongs of Big Ben are famous, of course, around the world, but the landmark will fall silent early next year because of vital restoration work. The clock needs to stop so that repair work, which will cost £29 million, can be carried out. Tim Muffet has more.
This is London. There are 399 steps to the top of what is surely the most regularly misnamed building in Britain. The Great Clock is housed inside the building that since 2012 has been known as the Elizabeth Tower in honour of the Queen. Before then, the Clock Tower, but widely referred to by the nickname given to the Great Bell, Big Ben.
It's 160 years old. If you ran your car for 365 days a year for the last 160 years, it would need some work doing. Eventually, it's going to stop. It needs restoration. It needs a good service. So that's what we'll be doing. We're taking this opportunity to take every single thing apart and have a look at it closely.
It is a 3-year conservation programme. The tower will be surrounded by scaffolding for much of that time.
This elevation, the water ingress is actually coming into this clock face, and as you can see, it's actually affecting and rusting away the ironwork. It is urgent. Unless we act now, it will take a lot more time and cost a lot more money.
The chimes of Big Ben were stopped for 6 weeks 9 years ago because of repairs. In 1976, the bell was silent for 9 months due to a major refurbishment. This time, London could be deprived of its familiar sound for even longer. How much longer? Until work's underway, the team won't know for sure. But this London landmark, temporarily at least, is about to go quiet and disappear from view. Tim Muffet, BBC News.
It'll be missed in the meantime. Well, speaking of clocks, actually, just a reminder, of course, it's that time of year again. The clocks go back this Sunday at 2 a.m. And then, Louise Lear, we're not going to have many more of these beautiful scenes, are we? There's a night's draw in, or are we?
I don't know. There's no signs of it yet. It's been incredible October, hasn't it, Kate?
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everybody. This was Kent earlier on today. An absolutely glorious day. And in actual fact, if you have got some sunshine, I'm sure the talking point at the bus stop is just how mild it is at the moment. We could see 18 degrees across southeast England, way above the average for this time of year. Now, not everybody has got the sunny spells, but favoured spots today have been across southeast England and through much of Scotland. But this thicker cloud here, particularly through Wales and the Midlands, well, that is a weather front, and it's thick enough for the odd spot or two of drizzle. Not much rain on it, but it's being a bit of a nuisance, really. And it will gradually drift its way steadily north and east overnight tonight. But to the south of that front, it stays incredibly mild. So if you keep some sunshine, you could see temperatures 17, 18 degrees. That's around the mid-60s. But even with some cloud around, 14 degrees is not bad, and with just a light breeze, pleasant enough. Thicker cloud then for the odd spot or two of drizzle through Wales, down into the Midlands. But further north of that, well, we could see a little bit of cloud and drizzle pushing into northwest England, but generally it's a bright, breezy affair into the afternoon for Scotland and Northern Ireland, with highs a little bit fresher, around 11 or 13 degrees. Overnight, our weather front brings outbreaks of light patchy rain into Northern Ireland and western Scotland. Elsewhere, we could see a little more fog in sheltered western areas. For most of us, it will be a relatively mild night, with the exception, though, potentially up into the far northeast. Here, if we keep the cloud well broken, we could see across eastern Scotland, northeast England, temperatures in rural parts close to freezing. So that's worth bearing in mind. But what's the weekend got in store? Well, not much change, really. We keep that dry theme for the final weekend of October, mild, and some fog patches just to add to that Halloween atmosphere for you. So we start off then on a pretty murky note, particularly in sheltered western areas. The rain becomes light and patchy, and chiefly up into the far north and west, really. But I suspect there will be a lot of cloud. Favoured spots, perhaps, for some brightness is in sheltered eastern areas. And again, it's still going to feel relatively mild, with 12 to 17 degrees the high. The high pressure stays with us, actually, for the second half of the weekend, with the weather fronts just pushing into the far north and west. The winds will strengthen. Here we could see some outbreaks of showery rain into the far northwest of Scotland by the end of the day. But generally speaking, again, we keep a lot of cloud, but we keep this mild, dry story for most of us. Top temperatures of 11 to 16 Celsius. So it's not going to feel very autumn-like at all in terms of the weather, and you may well forget to put the clocks back because you're talking about how mild it is. But don't forget, we'll get an extra hour in bed Saturday night into Sunday morning. Hurrah!
Always do with that. Thank you very much, Louise. Thank you. Before we leave you then, just our main story this lunchtime. The NHS in England is set to miss targets on recovering the cost of treating foreign visitors. And rebel groups in Syria launch a new offensive to try to break the siege of Aleppo by President Assad's forces. That's all from the BBC News at 1. So goodbye from me and the team here on BBC One Now. We join the news teams where you are. Have a very good afternoon. Bye-bye.